There is a plant that grows through sidewalk cracks while million-dollar lawns die from neglect. It sends roots 15 feet into the earth to reach water that no irrigation system can touch. It produces more vitamin A per serving than any vegetable in your grocery store. For 10,000 years, humans cultivated this plant as medicine and food so valuable that pilgrims carried it across the Atlantic like gold. It sustained European peasants through famines that killed kings. It fed American families when 25% of workers had no job and banks held nothing but worthless paper. Then we erased it, not because it failed, but because it was too successful. We reclassified it as a weed. We invented an $80 billion industry to poison it out of existence. We taught our children that this plant was an enemy of the perfect lawn, rather than the emergency food system hiding in plain sight. Not because the knowledge became irrelevant, but because a crop that grows everywhere, costs nothing, and cannot be owned has no value in an economy built on manufactured scarcity. Welcome to History's Hidden Harvest. If you're new here, this is where we dig up the survival wisdom that empires tried to bury. Subscribe and hit the bell, because what they erased, we remember. The archive opens in October 1929 in New York City. A stockbroker named William stands on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange as 16 million shares change hands in a single day. By the time the closing bell rings on Black Tuesday, October the 29th, $14 billion in wealth has evaporated. Banks that held his family's savings will close their doors within months. The job that seemed permanent will disappear. And the grocery store that always had food on its shelves will soon accept only cash from customers who have none. What happened next would reshape American consciousness for a generation. The Great Depression did not arrive with a single crash. It accumulated. Unemployment tripled from 1.5 million at the end of 1929 to 4.5 million by the end of 1930. By 1933, the figure reached 12.5 million workers. 1/4 of all American families had no employed wage earner. The banking system that Americans trusted collapsed. By 1933, nearly half of America's banks had failed, taking life savings with them. In the cities, bread lines stretched around blocks. Soup kitchens served thin broth to men who had owned businesses months before. Families who once employed servants now stood in charity lines, hiding their faces from neighbors. In New York, social workers reported that 25% of all school children were malnourished. In the mining counties of West Virginia, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania, that figure climbed to 90%. Children went to school with empty stomachs, if they went at all. Many had quit because they could not afford socks to wear. Then the drought came. In 1931, severe drought struck the Great Plains, beginning what became known as the Dust Bowl. For nearly a decade, the breadbasket of America turned to desert. By 1934, an estimated 35 million acres of formerly cultivated land had been rendered completely useless for farming. Another 125 million acres were rapidly losing topsoil. Farmers who had plowed the native prairie grasses to plant wheat watched the wind carry their fields to the Atlantic Ocean. Dust storms blackened skies from Texas to Washington, depositing 12 million tons of Great Plains soil on Chicago in a single day. 400,000 people fled the devastation. They loaded everything they owned onto trucks and drove west, searching for work that did not exist and food they could not afford. These migrants became known as Okies and Arkies, regardless of which state they actually came from. They lived in tent camps and Hoovervilles, shanty towns named in bitter mockery of the president who assured them prosperity was returning. And through all of this, one plant kept growing, in abandoned lots, along dusty roadsides, in the cracks of sidewalks outside shuttered banks, in backyards where vegetable gardens had withered. The dandelion. Clara Canucciari was 14 years old in 1929, growing up in a Sicilian immigrant family in Melrose Park, Illinois. Decades later, at age 91, she would become a YouTube sensation, sharing the recipes that kept her family alive during the Depression. In her videos and her book, Clara's Kitchen, she described how her family survived by eating what grew wild in their yard. They picked dandelions, burdock, and mushrooms. They grew vegetables in every available space. Meat was a luxury that appeared perhaps once a month. The vegetables were the main event. Her dandelion salad video captured something essential about Depression survival. The leaves cost nothing. They required no purchase, no transaction, no participation in an economy that had collapsed around her family. As Clara explained to her viewers, they were cheap because you could get them for nothing. All you needed was patience and work. This was not unique to Clara's family. Across America, millions returned to foraging knowledge that their grandparents had considered common sense. Unemployed miners in Kentucky and West Virginia ate wild greens to stave off hunger. Dandelions were gathered and cooked with whatever fat was available, mixed with eggs and potatoes when those could be found. In cities where factory workers had never grown their own food, vacant lots became subsistence gardens. By 1934, 70,000 such gardens yielded approximately $2.8 million worth of food to families on relief in New York City alone. In Brooklyn, Works Progress Administration gardens produced over 1 million pounds of vegetables for the borough's poor in a single year. The nutritional science explains why the dandelion worked when other foods failed. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, dandelion greens contain 10,161 international units of vitamin A per 100 grams. That represents over 300% of daily requirements, making it one of the highest vitamin A sources among any edible plant. It provides more vitamin A than carrots, more calcium than milk per calorie, more iron than spinach. A 2014 study, published in the Centers for Disease Control journal, ranked dandelion greens among the top 41 most nutrient-dense foods on Earth, placing it above kale, broccoli, and every other trendy superfood marketed to modern consumers. The writer Jo Robinson documented in her book Eating on the Wild Side that compared to spinach, dandelion leaves have 8 times more antioxidants, 2 times more calcium, 3 times more vitamin A, and 5 times more vitamin K and vitamin E. This is not a marginal difference. This is a plant that outperforms cultivated vegetables across nearly every nutritional metric. But nutrition alone does not explain survival. What made dandelion essential during the Depression was its complete independence from every system that had failed. Dandelions require no irrigation. Their taproots can penetrate 15 feet into the soil, accessing water that surface crops cannot reach. They thrive in disturbed soil, the kind created by human activity, construction, abandonment, neglect. They grow in every state of the continental United States. in every climate zone, in conditions that kill cultivated plants. They survive drought, trampling, pollution, and winter temperatures that freeze the ground solid. When spring arrives, they emerge before any planted crop is ready to harvest, providing nutrition during the hungry gap when stored food has run out and gardens have not yet produced. The economics of dandelion made it even more valuable. During the Depression, eggs cost 12 cents per dozen, which sounds cheap until you understand that cash itself had become scarce. Workers paid in scrip could not buy food at regular stores. Families whose savings had vanished in bank closures had nothing to exchange for groceries. But dandelions required no exchange at all. They grew without permission, without purchase, without any participation in an economy that had turned predatory. This independence was exactly why dandelions had to be destroyed. European colonists did not bring dandelions to America by accident. They brought them deliberately as valued medicine and food, so essential that they crossed an ocean packed in the limited cargo space of colonial ships. For centuries after arrival, gardeners cultivated dandelions intentionally. The plant that modern Americans spend billions trying to kill was once so prized that settlers weeded out the grass to make room for more dandelions. The transformation from treasure to trash began in the 20th century, when suburban lawns became symbols of prosperity and conformity. The unblemished green expanse signaled that you had money for unproductive land and time for pointless maintenance. In this context, dandelions became markers of poverty and neglect. A yard with dandelions suggested that the owner could not afford lawn care, could not keep up appearances, was somehow less successful than neighbors with chemically sterilized grass. The lawn care industry recognized the opportunity. If dandelions could be framed as enemies, homeowners would pay to destroy them. Americans now spend nearly $300 billion annually on lawn maintenance. The herbicide market alone generates over $11 billion per year. 60 million pounds of pesticides are applied to American lawns annually. 7 million wild birds die each year from lawn pesticide exposure. Humans pay money to poison a plant that would feed them for free while killing the wildlife that depends on dandelion nectar as an early spring food source. The chemical war on dandelions began in earnest in the 1940s with the introduction of phenoxy herbicides like 2,4-D. For the first time, homeowners could spray away the plant that their grandparents had considered essential. The cultural memory of the Depression was still fresh, the taste of dandelion greens still remembered, but the promise of chemical control proved irresistible. Within a generation, the knowledge that had sustained millions through economic collapse was classified as quaint folklore, replaced by trust in industrial systems that could fail as catastrophically as the banking system had in 1929. The pattern should be familiar by now. Efficiency replaced resilience. Dependency replaced self-sufficiency. A food system that anyone could access became an industry that only corporations could control. The same logic that concentrated American agriculture into vulnerable monocultures, dependent on global supply chains, now governs how we think about the plants in our own yards. We poison dandelions while importing vegetables from continents away, shipped in refrigerated containers powered by fuel from hostile nations, processed by companies whose stock prices matter more than our nutrition. If you want to recognize dandelion's survival potential, learn the identification markers. The deeply serrated leaves grow in a rosette pattern from a central point, with each tooth pointing backward toward the base. The yellow flower heads consist of hundreds of tiny florets, each capable of producing the familiar white seed puffs that children blow into the wind. The hollow stem releases milky white sap when broken. Both leaves and roots are edible, though the leaves become more bitter after the plant flowers. Harvest leaves in early spring before flowering for the mildest flavor. Young leaves work raw in salads dressed with oil and vinegar. Older leaves benefit from cooking, which reduces bitterness. The roots can be roasted and ground as a coffee substitute, a practice that sustained millions when actual coffee became unaffordable. Every part of the plant provides something useful. Nothing is wasted because survival allows no waste. Growing dandelions requires no effort because they grow themselves. The challenge is unlearning the impulse to destroy them. Stop applying herbicides. Stop treating your lawn as a status symbol. Recognize that the yellow flowers appearing each spring are not an invasion, but an inheritance. The same food source that kept Americans alive when every other system failed. The reality check is this: the dandelion never left. It still pushes through every crack, in every sidewalk, in every city in America. It still sends roots deep into soil that industrial agriculture has depleted. It still produces more nutrition per square foot than any crop you could plant. The survival knowledge that sustained Depression-era families through the collapse of the banking system, through dust storms that buried farms, through unemployment that lasted a decade, is still accessible to anyone willing to see it. What was suppressed was not the plant. What was suppressed was the recognition of its value. The understanding that our great-grandparents survived economic catastrophe not through government programs alone, not through charity, not through any system beyond their control, but through plants that grew in their own neighborhoods and knowledge that passed through generations of necessity. Every family that made it through the 1930s carried a debt to the wild foods hiding in plain sight. Every child of the Depression who learned to see dandelions as dinner rather than weeds inherited survival skills that no amount of money can replace. The shame we now feel about foraging was manufactured. The plants were salvation. Every person who learns this breaks the suppression cycle. Every yard that stops poisoning dandelions recovers what the lawn care industry tried to bury. The plant that fed America when the banks collapsed is still here, still growing, still waiting in every abandoned lot and every crack in every sidewalk for the next time money fails and only food matters. If this harvest revealed something for you, subscribe to History's Hidden Harvest and hit the bell. Every like and every share helps preserve what they tried to erase. The next harvest uncovers soon.